Welcome, chosen the ones. When they couldn't alter your soul, they tried forging your signature. Let it settle in for a minute. Because what you're going to hear is not only shocking, but also evil. Imagine waking up one day to realize that someone had the nerve to fabricate your whole marriage, counterfeit your identity, and imitate your very soul, all while you were out here minding your heavenly business, presumably wondering why your love life has been so dry. Well, it wasn't dry. It was hijacked. Here's a terrible fact. Every year, hundreds of falsified marriages are uncovered throughout the globe, many of which include identity theft, occult rituals, and inheritance fraud. However, you've decided on one. This was spiritually engineered. They were not just playing games. They were interfering with a holy timetable. Someone stood in front of a phony altar, stole your name, and donned your visage, expecting to seal your destiny without your knowledge. This isn't simply a swindle. That's spiritual warfare. Wearing a tuxedo. Here's the kicker. They thought you wouldn't find out. But guess what? You just did. Secure your seatbelts. Because what we're going to find isn't just surprising. It is a cosmic crime. Let's take a peek at the twisted ploy that attempted to delete your holy destiny by forging a ring and stealing a signature. Also, don't worry. I'll explain how it backfired. Let me begin. Number one, they couldn't get you. So they made a clone to take control of you. They were unable to control you. So they created a copycat version of you. This shows how desperate they were. You were too spiritually grounded, unpredictable, and unfettered by their manipulative tactics. So rather than attempting to modify you, they built a version of you that they could control. And it wasn't just about appearance. They tried to mimic your energy, essence, authority, and name. That's how deep this got. They falsified your signature not just to obtain access to worldly possessions, but also to your spiritual identity. A name in the physical world is linked to access, authority, and inheritance contracts. However, your name has spiritual importance. So when they falsified it, they weren't just removing your legal rights. They were trying to take over your destiny. This wasn't just fraud. It was a full-fledged identity theft operation with several levels of impersonation, deceit, and ritualistic alignment. And the worst thing is that they used to portray you as an imposter. They were not picked randomly. They studied. You observed. You discovered someone who could duplicate your look, posture, gentleness, and language. However, they did not only want to appear like you. They wanted to be you. They thought that no one would notice the exchange, especially you. But there's a reason why counterfeiters never succeed. Because you can fake a name, a signature, and a wedding picture. However, you cannot fake essence. They couldn't match your exquisite brightness. They failed to capture the spiritual power in your voice. They could not wear your anointing without being scorched from the inside out. They didn't do it because they loved you. They did this because they frightened you. Your free will, clarity, and calling jeopardized the whole scheme. They weren't merely trying to trap you. They wanted to replace you while you were alive. They thought you'd stay puzzled, mute, and delayed. They sought to undermine you and prevent you from sharing your own tale. But the truth has a voice, and no matter how long they attempted to keep it silent, it is now speaking. Everything that was previously concealed is coming to light, and the world is soon to learn that the real you was never the person they paraded about. The genuine you, unbought, undefeated, and unbothered, are all on the upswing. Number two, they did not form a marriage. They tried to obliterate your heavenly mission. They didn't just construct a marriage. They tried to thwart a miraculous maneuver. It was more than simply faking a romance. It required meddling with something holy. Marriage in the spiritual sphere requires more than simply two individuals coming together. It is a covenant, a gateway, and a union that facilitates purpose, legacy, power, and generational transitions. So when they created a marriage in your name, it wasn't just fraud. They were aiming to interrupt the celestial alignment before it had started. They understood that if you ever connected with a person God genuinely meant for you, it would spark a chain reaction that would rock everything around you. Spiritual authority, healing, wealth, and breakthrough are all aspects of connection you were born to have. Not just for you, but for whole lineages. So what did they do? They made determined to produce a paper replica of that relationship. A deal. A spiritual barrier. They didn't only want to postpone you. They wanted to reroute you, making you inaccessible in the spirit, untraceable in the physical, and unrecognized by your heavenly counterpart. The fabricated marriage was a quiet curse. It was intended to confound the skies, upset your timing, and hinder your progress. They wanted the heavens to see your name already united, preventing your real love from reaching you in spirit. These weren't simply signatures. These were spiritual contracts made with ill motives. But here's the thing. What is divine cannot be permanently suppressed by deception. A counterfeit paper cannot be used to remove what God has written. What? They didn't expect you to wake up. They did not anticipate you to recover, acquire insight, and start putting the pieces together. And now that you know the whole falsehood is crumbling, they believed they were being clever. They anticipated that no one would review the documentation, spiritual records, or energy signatures. However, what they falsified is now becoming exposed. And the actual covenant, which includes power, love, and destiny, is on its way. Their created alliance pales in contrast to the power that awaiting you. What? God banded together. Separation cannot be accomplished via deceit, ritual, or deception. Number 3. The imposter was not any random guy. They looked for a soul with a similar aura. The imposter was not a random selection. They did not just choose someone off the street to perform your role. They first observed how you moved, spoke, and carried your energy. They assessed your gentleness, stillness, and strength. They realized you weren't readily replicated. They looked for the closest match they could locate, not just in appearance, but also in feeling. Someone who can wear your light just enough to go through inspection, but not enough to complete your purpose. This was a strategic decision. They needed someone who could accurately convey your essence and convince people who did not know you. Someone who can blend in, sign the paperwork, appear in your name, and potentially even replicate your demeanor. Despite their best attempts, the imitation failed because they neglected one important point. You are not just a person. You have presence. You have something spiritual that cannot be faked. What's more stranger is that the individual they hired most likely had no clue what they were getting into. On the surface, it may have seemed to be an opportunity. Perhaps they were offered protection money or a place in an exclusive group. However, their ultimate intention was considerably more diabolical. They were adopting a stolen identity, and such actions always have spiritual repercussions. That individual becomes a live prop in a created story meant to hide your reality. They were trained to walk, speak, and move like you. But it couldn't be you, because being yourself is something you cannot learn. You were born into and have lived for it. The imposter merely carried your picture. They never had your scars. They did not pay the full amount for your oil. As a consequence, the truth is starting to shine through the fake facade. People are starting to notice the differences. The atmosphere is off. The spirit is lacking. The deception can no longer take the weight of the truth because the real you is not just returning to the scene. You're going to retrieve all that was taken in your name. There's also an imposter. They're trapped in a role they weren't supposed to play. Previously, it was about more than simply control. It was about inheritance theft. They were not merely attempting to control your life. They sought your spiritual inheritance. What they did went much beyond manipulation. This was a premeditated, ritual-level operation designed to seize what was properly yours. They saw something that many people neglect. Spiritual heritage does not only transmit it via blood. It advances via covenants, unions, and divine alignment. Because they knew you were carrying something uncommon, old, and powerful, they created a union in your name, hoping to legally and spiritually get access to gifts that were never meant for them. This was more than simply deception. It was a manufactured covenant intended to get into your spiritual DNA. They were aware that your name had weight. They were aware that your ancestry was not typical. They recognized that the promises linked with your existence were not inconsequential. Instead of overtly opposing you, they forged your name into a fictitious marriage, trying to deflect your flow of favor, blessings, and breakthroughs in their brains. If they could legally bind themselves or someone else to you, they would be able to inherit what you were meant to get. However, they did not merely ask for your blessing. They wanted to forego the procedure. They want your harvest without disclosing your seeds, crown, crucifixion, oil, or agony. So they sought to defraud the system. Spiritually speaking, It was a robbery of heritage. They sought to connect your name to someone it was never supposed to be connected with, in the hopes of opening the gates of favor, abundance, and spiritual protection. The disturbing aspect is that it worked for a time. Unexpected events occurred throughout their lives. Doors opened that should never have opened. But here's the fact. What is stolen cannot be maintained. Now the vibe has changed. What was siphoned is returning. What was hijacked is still being untangled. What was fabricated is now revealed. Your inheritance was never up for grabs. It carries your spiritual imprint. They tried to cheat their way into the system, but it is now correcting itself. And the ramifications of their attempted theft are going to overtake them. Because spiritual thievery does not imply quiet. It comes with heavenly consequences. Number 5, you were signed off without your permission since you were treated as property rather than a person. They did not recognize you as a live, breathing, thinking person with a soul and a destiny. They regarded you as property, something to be handled, altered, and manipulated to achieve their goals. They fabricated your name. It was more than simply a legal infraction. It was a clear statement of how little they respected your humanity. They didn't think you needed to be questioned. You didn't deserve to be included. Your voice was unneeded. Your attendance wasn't necessary, because they didn't see you as a person. You were an item. This wasn't about love, connection, or relationships. This was about ownership and power. They felt they were entitled to your name, future, access, and blessings. And the worst part, they didn't think twice about it. Forging someone's signature on something as important as a marriage takes away their agency, turning them to a tool, a means to a goal. It was not personal to them. It was transactional, cold, and planned in their minds. You were a sealed vault, and all they needed was the right combination to access what was within. It didn't matter if it was spiritual favor, money gain, legal perks, or social status. You were an asset, not a recipient. That thinking is what makes it so gloomy. They did not just break laws. They violated your dignity. They removed your voice from your own life tale. To make things worse, they most certainly persuaded themselves that they had the right to do it, that you owed them something, and that your life belonged to them since they were involved in your history. But the game's finished. The blindfold is gone, and you are no longer the quiet, unnoticed character in your own drama. You're speaking out, recovering your identity, voice, and autonomy. You're not a resource. You are not property. You are not a pawn in someone else's scheme. You are a celestial person with indisputable permission. Everything done without it is soon to be revealed and overturned in public. Number 6, you were concealed in plain sight while they created a story without you. They didn't need you to physically vanish. They merely wanted you to be quiet long enough for them to build a version of you that they could manipulate. This is what makes it so deceiving. You were right there, breathing, alive, and existing. However, they claimed you were not present when you were hidden in plain sight. They were out there developing an entire narrative around your name, energy, and tale, but nothing about your reality. This was not all falsehoods. The focus was on strategic identity warfare. They perceived your silence as consent. They perceived your absence as weakness when you were healing, isolating, rebuilding, or just uninformed of what was going on. They propagate incorrect information about you, one that made them seem terrific, one that gave them control, one that peeled away your complexity and reduced your identity to whatever they need at the moment. They used your picture as a costume, only enough to mislead outsiders. They utilized your name to get access to space, compassion, and resources. They told inaccurate and distorted tales about you. The hardest aspect was that they knew you couldn't defend yourself without being angry, theatrical, or insane. That is how elaborate the setup was. They made it clear that any effort to speak out would be viewed as envy or delusion. This wasn't just character assassination. This was an example of reputation stealing. And that was successful until recently, when something in the spiritual world shifted. The truth is starting to breathe again. People are starting to doubt the story. The atmosphere does not stack up. The mask is coming off, and your actual voice, which they attempted to quiet, is surfacing. The version they developed boosted their ego. It saved their lives. It managed compassion while hiding guilt. But the genuine you, the one with depth, scars, strength, and a soul they couldn't take away. That version is returning, and it is demolishing every tale built on mimicry. You are no longer hidden. And now that you are here, everything fake must shatter. The seventh fabricated marriage was a cage masquerading as devotion. It was not about love. It was a trap, plain and straightforward. They presented it as a commitment. However, the fabricated marriage amounted to little more than a spiritual prison. A system intended to keep you confined, trapped, and separated from the outside world. It may have looked like someone cared enough to commit to you, but behind it all, there was strategic restriction. They understood precisely what they were doing. They tied your name to a falsehood in the hopes that it would follow you around. They were not attempting to develop alongside you. They were trying to keep your genuine lover from discovering you, block blessings from contacting you, block the legal and spiritual avenues that were about to open in your favor. They didn't want the real you to emerge, so they associated your name with turmoil, uncertainty, and contracts you never signed. They created a path of interruption. Every time your name appeared in the spirit or in systems, it became ensnared in a web of false agreements. So everyone assigned to help you, whether in love, job, or favor, would halt, hesitate, or turn away entirely. Who wants to go into confusion? That was the isolation. Not only are people physically isolated, but they are also spiritually and emotionally abandoned. They wanted you to be unreachable. They intended to reject you without explaining why. All the while, you puzzled why connections failed, doors were shutting, and you felt invisible and unheard. They thought you'd give up, that the weight would destroy you, and that loneliness would devour you. But they didn't expect your heavenly protection. They didn't anticipate God to reveal the papers and burn the cage down from the inside, since false contracts don't stand up to divine inspection. The fog is lifting. The uncertainty has subsided, and what seemed to be a marriage is being exposed for what it was. Spiritual confinement camouflaged as a love deception. And you are not just breaking free. You are getting more in touch with reality. Finally, we see both chosen and free. Number 8. Your absence was not a coincidence. They created it to finish the ceremony. You were not missing by coincidence. You were purposely excluded from the process. Your voice, presence, and consent were purposefully removed. They did not forget to include you. They made no legal mistakes. They organized your absence knowing that if you were there, the ceremony would fail. This wasn't just forgery. It was cult-level manipulation masquerading as papers. Your signature was not only required to complete the contract, it represented the spiritual seal of the unseen realm. The signature represents enthusiasm, agreement, and strength. It is a kind of covenant. And they couldn't obtain your genuine consent because your spirit disagreed with their deception. Instead, they replicated, forged, and imitated it, trying to replicate your yes, without ever hearing your voice. That was how far they had gone. They didn't just want what you had. They wanted it without confronting you, honoring you, or including your wishes. What makes this so dark is that they did not require you to leave physically. They just needed you to be unaware. They wanted you to be disconnected from your own power so you wouldn't notice what was happening behind your back. So they moved silently, buried documents, signed papers in back rooms, whispered names during rituals, and tried to tie your fate to a forged agreement. It was never about the relationship. This was about ritual capture, which involved binding your spirit to a contract with a forged signature so that your blessings, energy, and divine access could be shifted. This is the same technique used in spiritual manipulation circles. Bypass the will, hijack the agreement, and sign with fraudulent consent. That's what happened here. But they overlooked this. What is founded on lies cannot be seen in divine light. And now that the light has illuminated every aspect of the ritual, you are no longer unaware. You are no longer absent. The version of you they attempted to imprison is awakening, and every spiritual cord tied without your permission is snapping. You did not sign it. You did not agree to it. And now heaven has called the whole thing into question. Number 9. You were made into a ghost in your own life. They didn't simply steal your name. They attempted to erase your existence while keeping your identity alive in the background, like a puppet on invisible strings. You are being transformed into a ghost in your own life. Every forged document, Every lie spoken in your voice, and every false signature signed in your name. It was all meant to make you disappear without dying. Not physically, but spiritually, socially, legally, and energetically. It was a covert assassination. Not with weapons, but with documents, false stories, and dark rituals. They did not want to harm your body. They wanted to erase your divine fingerprint, strip you of your essence, voice, and choices, reducing you to nothing more than a name passed around in spiritual and legal systems to open doors for others while you remain locked outside. You were alive. However, they were silenced. Present. However, it is often overlooked. Breathing. However, they are bound. This is what spiritual death looks like. They left your name on the altar, not to honor, but to deplete it, to use your energy as a power source while keeping you out of the loop. You fueled movements. You never signed up for financial rituals. You were never represented in places where you did not stand. This was not carelessness. It was an intentional design to ensure that if someone came looking for you, whether for a divine connection, business opportunity, or breakthrough, they were met with a wall of confusion, red tape, forged contracts, or someone claiming to be you. The plan was simple. Bury the true you beneath layers of falsehood so deep that you would never be discovered again. But this is the part that changes everything. You are still here. You didn't disappear. Your soul refused to bow. Your voice is breaking through the fog, as is the divine fingerprint they attempted to erase. It is reactivating. Your identity isn't just returning. It is roaring back with strength. Every untruth is being debunked. Each signature is being questioned. Every system that tries to escape you is being forced to face the truth. You were never gone. You were just reintroduced by Divine Order Number 10. They knew who you were long before you did, and they sought to rewrite your Genesis narrative. They understood who you were before you could explain it, before you grasped your own depth, and before you acknowledged your destiny. They had already felt the weight of your soul. You went into rooms like a kid, bearing a presence. They couldn't articulate it, but they felt it. And it terrified them. Because even while you were unconscious of your own power, your spiritual identity was already speaking. It was upsetting their shadows, questioning their phony power, and eroding their carefully created illusions. This was not a random act of treachery or bewilderment. This was a purposeful and calculated effort to disrupt your destiny. They spotted your heavenly destiny taking form and chose to cut it off at the source. Instead of supporting your journey, they established a false chronology that distanced you from your genuine roots, muddled your direction, and diverted your tale via lies and manufactured agreements. You weren't just impersonated. You were meticulously targeted. They sought to alter your beginning so that your future might be controlled. Because if they can alter your history, they can also confound your future. They understood that your genuine calling will unlock doors, uncover secrets, and shine light on long-hidden dynamics. So their purpose was not just to capture you, but also to keep you concealed from the rest of the world. That explains why the strike was so exact. It was spiritual warfare disguised as legal trickery, occult methods camouflaged as legitimate papers, identity theft. Not only will your name be shown, but so will your chronology, narrative, and legacy. They believed that if they acted early enough and created the appropriate conditions, the true you would never emerge. That you would live your life in confusion, uncertainty, and disconnection from your inner self. But their worst mistake was believing that your awakening could be halted. It couldn't. And now you are starting to recall. You are reclaiming both your origin narrative and your future. And as you do, every false story that tries to replace you crashes beneath the weight of truth. They tried to quiet the chosen one before you could raise your voice. You have discovered it, and they are afraid again. The person who played you is now suffering with the curse that was meant for you. The person who felt they were intelligent enough to imitate you has been devoured by the curse they thought they could escape. That was the part they didn't expect. They weren't just signing a name. They were inviting your battle without your consent. And this is a tragedy waiting to occur. Spiritual rules are exact. They don't miss. They don't mind if the signature was falsified or the ceremony was twisted. Whoever takes on your role joins your fights, and without the heavenly shielding intended for your soul, it becomes painful. They thought they were snatching a blessing. In truth, they were taking your burdens. Every challenge, tribulation, and spiritual fire was meant to develop you into the person you are today. They are now compelled to confront it fresh, unguarded, and untrained. They replicated the crown, but not the cross. And in the spirit realm, this is stealing, with a terrible price. When they impersonated you, they thought they were winning Eve's favor. Invisibility. They had no idea that your suffering, prayers, sacrifices, and divine alignment underpinned every ounce of grace in your life. They didn't earn the oil. As a consequence, as the weight of the fighting subsided, they were crushed rather than raised. And now they've attempted to divert the curse to you by fabricating that false union, image, and role. It is reversing like a boomerang, since you would never curse in the first place. You were being honed. However, in an effort to dodge the fire, they went into it headlong against divine will. They wanted to take over your life, but ended up devouring your shadow. Allow someone to wear your light without having access to it. No. Allow them to sit on the phony throne they created through fraud and lies. Because spiritual law does not favor ambition. It respects the truth. The fact is that only the selected can live on their chosen route. Anything else leads to exposure, disintegration, and divine correction. And that is precisely what is occurring right now. A number. This was a sacrificial swap attempt. But you weren't the lamb. You were the lion. This was not only a falsehood. It wasn't just thievery. This was a sacrificial swap attempt. A wicked, premeditated ceremony intended to sacrifice you in the spirit world so that they could walk away. Blessed, protected, or exalted. They thought that by using your name on cursed papers, forged contracts, and spiritual altars, they might transfer the blame to your soul. That's how horrible and twisted things were. The unexpected twist was that you were not the lamb, something they couldn't have predicted. You were the lion. You were not created to be silently sacrificed for someone else's advantage. You were created to scream into the darkness, which they thought would consume you. They perceived you as the board's weakest, most vulnerable, most expendable piece. But they were utterly mistaken. You represented the whole plan. They never understood. They didn't only want your name. They wanted your spiritual protection. They sought your favor with God. They felt that if they presented you as a sacrifice, heaven would not notice that they were sneaking into blessings using your identity while passing on their curses to you. This is the sort of spiritual scam they engaged in, trying to incorporate your life energy into their rituals in order to buy them time or favor. However, rather than eating you, these rituals have backfired. Because when someone seeks to sacrifice a chosen one, the altar becomes a judgment bench. The fire doesn't kill the lion. It reveals the wolves in sheep's clothes. And that is precisely what is occurring right now. Everything they said about you and distributed with your name attached is now propelling your growth. You were not sacrificed. You were activated. Every assault polished you, every betrayal sharpened you, and every false covenant transformed into a courthouse in the spirit world where heaven decided in your favor. They are now watching in astonishment as the person they thought they had given up becomes the one demanding justice. Because lions do not die peacefully. They rise, yell, and regain what was never theirs to surrender. Number God led it to happen. As a consequence, the courts of heaven may render a decision that no one can reverse. God didn't miss it. He didn't sleep through it. He observed every fake document, impersonation, every covert meeting performed in your name but not in your presence. And although it seemed like desertion and crushed your heart that no one interfered, he let it happen. Not because he didn't care, but because the spiritual court demanded proof from the realm of heaven. God is more than a comforter. He is a judge, and just as a courtroom needs proof before a verdict is issued, the courts of heaven demand indisputable evidence in order to make an eternally binding judgment. If God had halted it too soon, it would have just been a rumor. But now it's recorded. It is a spiritual album. The case is closed. They did something horrible. Yes. However, it also gave heaven the ability to publicly remove them without delay or appeal. You see, when someone dares to invoke God's name while concealing his chosen identity, they reach a world of heavenly justice that no earthly court can equal. And because you tolerated it and did not react as they anticipated, heaven was able to build a case so formidable that no power in hell could defeat it. God is ready to restore you in a loud and spectacular way. It won't be talked in whispers. It'll be loud and lawful. It will be worldwide. Because of the falsehoods they said, the schemes they concocted, and the platform they put up to humiliate you. God is transforming it into your platform. They created it assuming you'd never recover. Instead, it is becoming into a platform from which your vindication will be heard for years. This is everlasting justice, not just emotional healing. When God judges in your favor, He does more than simply cleanse your reputation. He completely rewrites the tale. No more concealing, explaining, or justifying oneself. The judgment has already been passed in heaven and is soon to be felt on earth. The individuals who acted as judge, jury, and executioner in your life want to see God overturn everything they believed was definitive. A number. Your sincere partnership will break generational curses. They attempted to remain alive. They didn't only fake a marriage to take your blessings. They did it to delay your fate because they knew what your genuine union was capable of. They understood that once you united with your divinely allotted mate, something extraordinary would occur. Their fabricated relationship was more than a fiction. It was a frantic effort to preserve a generational system of bondage, misunderstanding, and spiritual servitude, which your authentic love story would demolish. Your actual union jeopardizes everything they've built on falsehoods. Why? Because it isn't only romantic. It's revolutionary. When two chosen ones meet at the perfect time, the connection becomes a spiritual earthquake. The love they attempted to prevent in your life has the potential to break curses, shatter inherited trauma, and disturb the rituals that have held families bound in silent misery for centuries. That type of relationship jeopardizes civilizations built on secrecy and subterfuge. They realized that if they could fake your marriage, they could postpone the healing and clarity that would inevitably follow your actual one. Because your counterpart was designed not just to love you, but also to empower you. And together, your holy mission would have exposed the fundamental foundations of the cycles they needed to hide in order to keep their control. However, they were unable to halt this. Divine timing. Your actual counterpart is pulled to you by spiritual gravity, not force. And when you meet, the energy change will last well beyond your relationship. It will echo through lineages, smash altars established in your family's name, and destroy whole spiritual infrastructures based on your separation. They dreaded your love because they knew it would result in deliverance. They dreaded your marriage because it represented the end of their control. The system they sought to maintain by creating a covenant in your name is now crumbling under the weight of your true one. Your love will become a battle cry. The prophesy will be fulfilled via your union. And every spell they try to preserve will fall in the light of a love tale. They were unable to create, manipulate, or survive. What they did to you was not in mistake. It was an organized spiritual crime inspired by self-doubt and dread of the future self. They faked papers, impersonated your essence, and tried to seal your destiny with phony unions and stolen identities, all in order to alter your past and steal your fortune. But the irony is astounding. In their frantic endeavor to hide your reality, they proved it. Their falsehoods revealed your strength and fear. Make your heavenly identity known more clearly than any spotlight ever could. They believed you were merely a name to exploit, but you were truly a heavenly blueprint sent to break down generational relationships and deceptive networks. And now, everything they designed to keep you in control has been turned against them. The exact plots that were designed to ruin you have turned into proof that heaven is utilizing to exonerate you. And your narrative does not end tragically. It concludes with divine reversal. You are not returning softly. The courts of heaven are welcoming you back, legally restored, spiritually strengthened, and visible to the whole world. Your true name is being reinstated. Your true union is getting closer. Every shrine, system, and false building created during your absence is being dismantled, not by your hands, but by the thunder of your return. God didn't only save your life. He has protected your legacy. He allowed the exposure to build a case so solid and comprehensive that no one on earth or in the spirit could challenge it. You aren't just surviving what they did. You are emerging in full power, equipped with the truth and crowned with the exact punishment they hope to escape. Let this be a warning to all imposters. You cannot steal the chosen's fate. You may fake the name, but you cannot defy the call. What was intended to be your tomb has transformed into your stage, and what was built in darkness is now driving you into unstoppable brightness. So rise, chose one. Your voice is returned. Your name is cleared. Your story is no longer under siege. It is divinely authored. The next chapter focuses on both compensation and redemption. With curiosity, your involvement will be remembered for years. Hold up. The selected one. Do not scroll away as if this were just another video. Did you sense it in your spirit? This was more than simply substance. It was confirmation. That was delicious. Intelligence fresh from the throne chamber, suited to your schedule. And it's too strong to keep to yourself. So here's what you should do, as if your breakthrough depended on it, which it very well may. Subscribe to the channel now. Not tomorrow. Not that I remember. Now push the button as if you were slamming the gavel in the courts of heaven. Because this is your place. This is your refuge. This is when truth meets fire. Like this video with holy courage. Let the algorithm know we are no longer playing small. Every light alerts the system that the selected individuals have joined the conversation. Leave a strong remark below. Say they fabricated it, but God overturned it, or heaven ruled in my favor. If you want to live by this motto, let your digital footprint speak for you. Share this with someone who has no clue what has happened behind their back. Someone who has experienced spiritual assault but lacks the ability to communicate it. Send it to your closest friend, cousin, prayer partner, or even that quiet auntie who always notices when something is wrong. Finally, remain locked in. Because if you thought it was oily, oh honey, we're just getting started. What occurs next will disturb the foundations, so don't simply watch. Join the movement, catch the wave, and walk with the Chosen's fireproof favor. Tell them you are not the one who forges, fakes, or forgets. You are the one God has been preparing in quiet. He's going to say it loudly. God bless you.